Channel's coming to an end as the Doctor of Eumenics. It was trying to teach you the only worldview that would allow for your survival, the eco-centric worldview. I've seen a regression in this, although I haven't met anybody who achieved it. I've tried to bring back the concept of language and life skills to you, and that's been a losing battle as well. But those things are required to create win-win scenarios for whatever mitigation ventures you wanted for your children's generations that are going to be so much worse than anything experienced in the past and for an extremely long duration of time. I've tried to talk to you about my theory on HSD, which is a grand unification theory in the social sciences and humanities, which explains what's happening now. It explains the Anthropocene. You might think, what? That's about climate change. No. The Anthropocene is related to our flaws up here as a species, and our flaws up here are partly the first two things I mentioned, the wrong worldview. This should be one, not many. And, if we are going to get to the next stage of human evolution, which seems like we're going in the other direction at an accelerated rate. Again, the Anthropocene. It's not carbon that's devolving us in the atmosphere. It's us that's creating imbalances in our social structures and in our ecological and climate models. So the other thing I wanted to say is about my theory. I want to repeat what it is. It is what happened to our brains as a species over an extended duration of time. We could go 10,000 years, but based on other types of domestication syndromes other than, the ones that were really brought to the next level because of agriculture, is, it could be before that or after that. There's a lot of different types of human domestication syndromes, but definitely religions are one. Economics, the monetary paradigm, domesticating plants, domesticating animals, domesticating ourselves, domesticating our own kids. When you do that more and more, and it causes trauma, and you have less and less access to the higher functions of your brains as you become these automatons, unable to even be aware that you are automatons, then yes, eventually tipping points are passed, and the acceleration of your downfall taking the biosphere that I love, my creator, down with you, breaks my heart. But it's not about my heart. It's about breaking the very concept of life. So you are an anti-life equation in the system, and you must be removed. Now, this system may not have had cybernetic concepts in place for something like you because you're new. A species that has failed on such a massive scale, counter-terraforming its own planet. I don't think the planet has seen this before, so I don't expect good things, because what I've been talking about has been going over your heads. The people that tried to listen to little bits of it, in one ear, out the other. It's pretty sad.
It's pronounced hummus. And we never did that in my family. What do you know about Passover anyway?
Well, I've just been doing a little reading.
About Passover? What, are you having trouble sleeping?
Well, actually, I was going to surprise you, Fleischer.
Surprise me.
Mm-hmm. With a Passover dinner.
You want to have a Seder?
Yeah, for you.
They're doing well in their relationship, although they both have, relationship pathologies. And based on their cultures, their environments, their upbringings, their parents, they're doing well right now. And so they want to connect as social creatures through something that they want, one of them as part of his culture more, and the other, wants to embrace it as a way to connect, but that's iffy, right? And sometimes you got to wonder, are these, like a religion is not something that is fundamental. It doesn't exist as a real thing in the natural world, but there are things that exist for real for social creatures, and those are the best ways to connect. Like, we all have basic needs as social creatures, to be witnessed, to be given opportunities whether we succeed or fail, to be heard, to be appreciated, to be accepted for who we are no matter what stage of the personal development or self-actualization we are in our lives at whatever age compared to the average person. But right now what I see are people that are pretty much all far, far behind for what would be a human type of development all around the world. It's at 99.99999%. And eventually, you got to explain this data. And this is how I came up with my theory on HSD.
Pascal Lamb, Matza, what do you think?
Well, for one thing, Pascal Lamb went out with the Second Temple, and for another thing...
So you don't want it?
Oh, please, don't get me wrong here. I think it's very sweet. I mean, that's not necessary. It'd be like me wanting to have an Easter egg party for you or something.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing. I don't know. It's...
I don't get it. I'm just trying to give you part of your culture.
Oh, please, come on. I don't want to fight about this. I think it's very sweet. I just... I don't know what to say. I'm not comfortable with it, Can we just leave it at that?
Yeah.
Oh, come on. McConnell.
Yeah.
Now, the next stage of the conversation in a healthy couple would be, hey, I want to connect with you in a different way. Can we sit down and do a list of things? In the relationship that I've been in, the last one, I've always wanted to do this. I've wanted to plan goals that were longer term, that were short term, that were, for the weekend, whatever. And they were not about consuming, or they were... And you can't get that with somebody that doesn't want to pursue their own maturation process or personal development. But it would work if I found the elusive Homo sapien. It's about, connection and intimacy at human levels. It's amazing what this brain is capable of if two Homo sapiens got together. I mean, you can freeze time in a moment of bliss with the right kind of disciplined mind. I'm going to press pause and get back to the area where I was. Okay, I'm only showing you the end of this episode, which is part of, if you're interested, it's season 5 of Northern Exposure. And it's the episode called, what is it, fish something? Holy moly, am I looking at the right one? Hold on. Oh yeah, it's called Fish Story. Here we go, let's finish this.
Here we go, page 10, please. Marilyn, why don't you tell us about the carpus, if you would, which is the parsley.
Okay. The carpus...
Just pick it up.
Oh. The carpus represents our gratitude to God for the bounty of the earth. We dip it in salt water to remind us of the tears our ancestors shed when we were slaves in the land of Egypt.
Very nice.
Now these, by the way, are what we would call cultural teachings. Recently again I saw a poster, what is it called, Youth Rangers Canada, and it had different categories, and the category under life skills showed some young people with horses. Again, it's sad for me to see this. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible that those people took life skills lessons, but it's misdefining life skills again. So it's, here, for example, there's connection between community members, okay? But it's not a deep connection. It's mostly, the effort being made, sharing a meal, and learning about cultural traditions of one of the people there. Now, they all have their cultural traditions, and some are horrible, and some are average, and some are good and should be, passed on. But most shouldn't be passed on because we're not very evolved as a species. Most should be questioned, actually. But it's still a nice moment because it's important to know where somebody's coming from, like know what helped shape them. So sometimes you can reference, hey, you're responding in this way. It's not good for you. We care about you, and it's not good for the community members that care about you. And you might want to question that part. It's good to know where they're coming from, what their history is. But this is not, for example, the bonding time, for everybody in the same way. That would be, for example, let's say a conversation happens after around the table where somebody shares some self-disclosure that maybe they've never shared before that relates to something specific, let's say about their youth. And then there's a facilitator that would, make sure that if that triggers come up, they're managed well. That'd be more, and these kind of things happen in life skills lessons. This is more what would create closeness and intimacy and the most rewarding of social interactions. But this is still good. This is still a form of respect, and this is still being open-minded, and this is still participating in collective learning.
Get the carpus, and you can eat it if you like. Okay, next page, everyone. Maggie, why don't you tell us about the matzah, if you would?
Behold the bread of affliction our ancestors ate when we were slaves in the land of Egypt. Let it remind us of people everywhere who are poor and hungry. Let it call to our minds people today who are still enslaved and without freedom. May all in need come and celebrate Passover with us. May God redeem us from all servitude and trouble. Next year at this season, may the whole house of Israel be freed, and may all people enjoy liberty, justice, and peace.
So again, the bad people will interpret those words in bad ways, and the good people will make the good things out of it. And it's the same. So religions, in a lot of ways, can be measured to bring as much the bad out of people as the good out of people. So that, it's one of the reasons. But it also disconnects us from the natural world. And it gives us an inflated ego. It makes us suffer from human chauvinism, which is one of the deadly, deadly types of, cultural or individual pathologies. You'll see this in most leaders of the world. So right now, I would say that we have not succeeded at the religions, and the religions were only meant at a very infantile stage of our evolution as a species. And the fact that we have not given up religions yet makes us, even worse at accelerating the Anthropocene. So like when Marilyn was reading about oppression against the Jewish people in the past, she has cultural similarities probably to share, but also a lot of people there, like if you look at Chris comes from a family that has been at war with another family for generations, that you saw in a previous episode. So we all have this in common. But what is it about religion that makes people believe that, let's say, the whole house of Israel, or whatever you want to call it, that there's a God that would make it okay for you to inflict more pain or more suffering, or that revenge is a normal thing for an omnipotent God to be supporting, or, instead of the growth of his people, and that whether people define, creators in this way or this way is to actually justify wars or territories or boundaries, or who should be suffering more and how to accelerate these traumas, and to do it against their enemies at a younger and younger age of their children. This is insane. So it's sad for me to see, and a lot of people, I think, if they would want to partake in a conversation with me about what's happening in the murders that Israel is doing against Palestinians. And I'm not saying that Hamas doesn't exist, but if you kind of calculate the events and you weigh them in majorities of what happens, and what for example, at a humanist party, I've mentioned this in a much long time ago. I was in Courtenay, and a guy with multiple medals in the Canadian Armed Forces that was retired and managing the Comox museum said he was so inspired for his kids that they wouldn't live through the wars because now weapons got so good that there'd be almost no innocent casualties. Well, these weapons exist, and that was like more than 10 years ago this guy said this, and he probably isn't even aware of what exists now, to be more precise. But the precision isn't there, and in fact there's so much hatred and trauma that builds that people kill their own. And not just that, but many people behind closed doors say, that's the price of war. That's the price of what? No, it's not the price of war, because there's no war going on right now. There's mass murder, there's genocide. And it's not the price of war, it's the price of having a dysfunctional religious mind, and also a mind infected with so many other forms of human domestication syndromes that even people that report on it as journalists that are the most courageous, they still don't see the big picture or use the right kind of language when they do so.